I ordered a AM3 motherboard, and it's supposed to have some extra goodies with it, and I figure I would record opening the box to see what is inside. Who knows, maybe there might be a measuring tape trying to play a tap dance inside. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but that would still be quite neat. On the inside, there seems to be a very thick Intel stock cooler, which is actually very nice because I could actually use a better stock cooler than the one I have for my Core 2 Quad PC. And we also got a AMD stock cooler as well. If I'm not mistaken, this is for AM2 and AM3. If it's not for AM2, it is definitely for AM3. And if I am also not mistaken ×2, I think this is actually meant for the high-end CPUs, like, for example, the Phenom 6 cores and stuff like that, which is quite neat. We also got another graphics card, which is actually quite neat. It apparently, from some searching online, is a AMD Radeon R5 430 OEM version. It seems to be missing a fan, but you know, that's fine. It's probably not going to draw all that much. What's that? I smell it. There sounds like there's something burning. It can't be the graphics card. We also got a 8GB kit of DDR2 800MHz RAM from Corsair, which is actually a pretty fast kit of DDR3, too. I mean, if it was DDR3, that would be very slow, actually. But for DDR2, it's actually very fast. So, you know, that's actually quite, I can't keep saying quite nice. I mean, I sound like a broken record. That's quite good. We also got a ton of CPUs. If I'm not mistaken, exactly 1 dozen, which is a lot. Like a cheaper lot amount. I'm just going to quickly mention each CPU. So for the socket LGA1155, I got a i5 3570, i3 2120, i5 2400, i5 2400S, i3 3220. That's a hard one to say. Pentium G2020. For the socket 775, I got a Pentium D 945, Pentium 4 640, Pentium 4 641, Pentium E 6550, Pentium D E5200. For the AM3 socket, I got a Phenom 2 X6 1035T. Yeah, that is a lot of CPUs. That's amazing. And then the biggest thing in the box that we can't forget is the motherboard. The motherboard is a Gigabyte GA-MA770-UD3 revision 1.0. Or in other words, it is a quite nice AM3 motherboard. It supports 8GB of DDR2 RAM at, I think, what was it, 1000 MHz or something? What's the fastest DDR3 speed? It supports DDR3 speeds up to 1066 MHz. And just to save myself about 12 hours of editing, and you about 20 minutes of hearing me explain stuff, let me quickly explain what's going on. So I went over and decided, you know, let's use this motherboard and CPU and RAM and cooler as a computer for a week to see, you know, how good is it? Can you still use a Phenom 6 daily to do gaming and video editing and whatnot? So I set it up, and I got a couple crashes. Okay, no big deal, I thought. Then I got some more crashes, and then the computer stopped posting. The only way to get the computer to post is if I went over and had it basically sit for about 10 minutes, and then it would actually post. I thought, okay, maybe I can go over and swap the RAM out. I tried that, and nothing happened. I tried swapping the CPU out for a 4-core Phenom, 2 different 4 cores, and that also did nothing. Then I got help trying to get this thing working, and they said, try to press the south bridge down and the north bridge to see if that does anything. Pressing the north bridge chip on the motherboard did nothing. Pressing the south bridge chip actually made the computer post. Then when I let go, it unposts. So that seems to be a problem with that chip. So what I did was I got a super thick thermal pad, and I put that between the Southbridge cooler and the Southbridge chip to put extra force in there, and it seems to be actually posting now and not having to wait like 10 minutes for it to warm up before it actually posts, and it's not crashing nearly as much anymore. It used to crash every 5 minutes roughly to 10 minutes, and now it goes about 2 hours without crashing. Now, it still does crash. The CPU was overclocked to 3.15 GHz, and that could have been the cause, I'm not sure. So I went over and overclocked it. Yeah, overclocked, sure. I underclocked my overclock to 2.99 gigahertz. And it's been about an hour now, and we haven't got a crash. Let's knock on some wood. I'm not sure if it's going to crash or not. We'll see. But it's not that big of a underclock, it's just 100 megahertz roughly, so we'll see. If it were to actually be more stable and run like this, that would be nice. But at the same time, if it's the Southbridge piece not working right, then it shouldn't have anything to do with overclocking. But maybe it will. And I'm actually editing this video on that CPU and motherboard, and also doing this voiceover as well on that CPU and motherboard. On Cinebench R23, on the real-time priority, the multi-core test got a score of 2,211, and the single-core test got a score of 409, and the MP ratio is 5.41. I'm not sure what the MP ratio means, but the single core is definitely quite slow, and we do actually feel that quite badly in some games like Minecraft. Going around my little track I made in my Let's Play world, basically it takes you through some pretty intensive spots of the world and some pretty easy to run parts of the world, and in the easy to run spots you're going to expect around 50 frames per second, and in the more intensive areas you're going to be looking at the low 20s to upper teens, which is not very good, though there is a granted with that. Granted, it was with shaders. Without shaders, the performance can go from around 100 frames per second in the easy to run areas to around 50 in the more hard to run areas. Though, yeah, there is of course going to be a though here, it is quite stuttery. Beam and G Drive ran quite decently actually. On the normal preset, the game was getting about 37 frames per second on average, 26 frames per second, 1% lows, and a 2 frames per second, 0.1% low, where when you're driving across the entire map, it does freeze at one point. Now, the freeze isn't big, it's just a stutter, basically. Now, there is also something a little bit interesting. I've noticed with this computer, the graphics card is completely maxed out, but the temperature of the graphics card is not resembling what it would normally be if it was maxed out. But in Task Manager, Hardware Monitor, Hardware Info, and also MSI Afterburner, yeah, it is showing it's completely maxed out. It's not out of VRAM, and it's not running hot or using the power it would normally use. So I am not exactly sure why. Maybe the PCIe slot or something is old or something, I don't know, but yeah, something in there is making the graphics card pretty slow. And on the absolute lowest preset, the game was getting 53 frames per second on average, 34 frames per second on the 1% lows, and 23 frames per second on the 0.1% lows. So it was definitely running quite a bit better on the lowest preset. Still a little bit less than I was expecting, but at least this game is using all 6 cores. Halo Infinite is up next, and it says, error. CPU does not support the following required features. SSSE3. Please upgrade your CPU to support the application's minimum specifications. Now, I cannot actually upgrade the CPU because the motherboard doesn't really support anything higher with better instructions, but it actually let me load the game up anyway, which was quite neat, though there is a slight caveat. I couldn't actually get into a multiplayer match, it just let me sit there for about 30 minutes and I didn't get into a game. So I'm assuming something to do with the anti-cheat of the game doesn't like the CPU. Fall Guys also ran quite badly, so Fall Guys ran on the lowest settings at 1440p, anywhere between roughly 13 frames per second and 25. Sometimes it would hit 30, but at least in the beginning and about halfway through the map, you're often dropping into the teens, to low teens, which is not very good. And to add to that, Also, the graphics card is showing it is 100% used, although it's barely actually being used in reality. So I think it is something to do with the PCIe slot maybe not working completely right or something, or maybe it's not fast enough because it's too old, I don't know. But yeah, it's not being used fully, but it is technically graphics card bottlenecked in this case, I'd assume, because of what's going on. Or maybe it's motherboard bottlenecked? I don't know, but that still doesn't seem right. And Borderlands 3 is also quite playable. It's not the best experience, but it's also not the worst experience. So on the low settings, it was getting between 40 and 50 frames per second. Yes, I had some stutters here and there, but they weren't significant or anything. They were just, yeah, once in a while it might stutter. Though, I have also noticed again, the graphics card is quite highly used, especially because it's on the low settings. It should probably be around 40 to 50% usage right now, but that's fine. It's at least running this game pretty decently. There will be definitely more videos to come testing out the 12 plus CPUs and that graphics card, which is definitely not a fire hazard. Okay, it really isn't. It's just a fan missing. But yeah, I definitely want to check out all of those in separate videos. And I also want to do a 1 week update with the Phenom and also do a bunch more game benchmarks with it. But for now, I am out of time. So I'm going to say thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you again next week. Bye bye.